Welcome back, everyone. This is part 2 of our blue heron. In class, we finished a fair bit of it to this point at a minimum. And I'm just going to show you how to do the bird's back, if you like, where the feathers are, because that was probably the main point. And then we did this already with the blue, and then we painted in the black, which is pretty straightforward, and we'll paint the black up there as well. So I actually put together another one just to show you how to do the back of the bird, and I'm going to do that for you. So we'll start by just doing the same wash we did before, which was I believe a cobalt blue, and then well, maybe I should be moving this down further. No, up further. A cobalt blue and a little bit of imperial purple. So we'll start with that. I'm going to mix up those colors. Okay, so we're going to do the initial wash on this bird of the cobalt blue. What I want to do is I want to run some water all the way down his neck and over his back, so that this part of the bird is actually wet, and you can go right into the part that's black. And that's going to help us apply that nice transparent layer. So I'll start up here. I want to leave the white of the at the back of the neck. So I'm only focusing on painting on the right side and working my way down from there. So I'm applying my cobalt blue maybe here at the top of his face. I'm just going to wash out this a little bit into his beak so that it's not as bright there. And there's a tiny bit of cobalt blue up in there. So I'm just focusing on this side of the bird at this point. Okay, and as I get down, I'm hitting this water. Here I'm going to also soften, because I want this to kind of bleed into the feathers that are hanging down on his chest. And just continue on with that blue. I'm going to leave a little bit of white here. There's a little white spot. And then I can continue down here. I'm not too worried. I do want this part here to be blue. And I'm just going to take my water brush and let that go down. Now here it might be a bit too much white. I want to leave some white, but I don't want to leave a huge amount of white there. Okay, and then here there's some dark, but there's also some light. So I'm just putting in that area. Okay, and then I'm going to take a damp brush and I'm just going to soften out this part here so we don't have a hard line at the bottom where his chest is. And up here it's a bit bluer, so I'm just going to put that in. And then if you want to drop some imperial purple, you can kind of drop it in the middle of here. Just make sure it's still wet there. Mine is still wet. Well, actually, it's not as wet as my imperial purple. As you can see, it's kind of blossoming out. But I see a fair amount of purple down here. I just need to get a thicker mix so it doesn't do that. And then dab off my brush. Okay, as I go down here. And I see a bit of purple right up against that white that we had. And then underneath these feathers on his back, I think there's a bit of purple there as well. Now I kind of messed up with this cobalt. So again, I'm just going to go, since it's still pretty wet, I'm just going to go in and add a bit more of that. I'm going right into the palette to get that. So it didn't go as nice as my other ones here, but it's going to be quite a bit darker on the neck than I originally wanted it to be. But the main reason I'm doing this is to show you the method I used once I got up to the feathers that come down on his back. So we will do that in a second as soon as this is dry. If it's bleeding out anywhere, you can just leave it and get it on the next round. I didn't mask this one, so maybe what I'll do is I'll just take some water and do a few branches. I don't have any background on this one either, so I'm just a few feathers down here. So I'm just adding these in with my purple and my cobalt. Trying to get very thin lines, so I'm going very fast in order to do this. I don't want too much paint on my brush, and if I keep going into this area, it kind of messes it up, so I have to kind of avoid that now. This is another way of doing them if you don't have a background already in there. And just a bit more at the top here. That should do the trick. Okay, and I will demonstrate the method we used on the back as soon as this is dry. We're now completely dry. I've got a bit of a bump in it because of I left it in the sun, which almost always gives me some bumps, but I think we can work around that because this is just a demonstration. So in order to do this feathery effect, what I want is I want some steel blue in here, and in order to get the steel blue, I'm just going to mix some neutral tint with some cobalt to get a nice steel blue. You could put some ultramarine in there too. I think my mixture is a little green, so if it is a little green, you could use a bit of ultramarine in it. So I have these mixtures that I'm working with. This one to me looks a bit too gray, so I'm just going back into the ultramarine mixture and I'm adding this one into it, and hopefully I get somewhere close to what I want there. Okay, so I would say more ultramarine, a little bit of cobalt just for color harmony, and then that should do the trick. And how we did this part is we're using very quick strokes. I'm just going to clean off my brush, and we're going to go from the bottom and go like this, flick up. And the method works well if you go quickly. I do have a bump here, so I'm not sure how that's going to work, but we'll give it a shot. So make sure your brush has paint on it, but then kind of rub it off on the side of your palette, and let's go. So we'll start over here. So I'm just going up like this and making my strokes quickly. It curves a little bit this way as you get towards the front, and as you get towards the back, so you're just very lightly touching it with that, touching the paper with your brush. Now I'm going a little bit stronger. I'm trying to stay in the wet areas that I already did. And you don't want too much paint on your brush. I'm just wetting the brush probably this far down. So not very far down at all. But I want to make sure it's nice and dark in there. I might even just take a little bit of neutral tint onto the brush, wipe it off, and then just where it's already wet, just put a little bit of that neutral tint in. And I notice there's a bit of a spot back here that's kind of dark. I've got too much white here, but we can fix that as we go. So that's what we did there. And then we have the same effect over here. So you can also do it here. It kind of starts that way. And then you can extend some of these. I'm concentrating on just where the body is when I do this. I can take a couple of them down, but it's better to just concentrate on where the body is. So that's what we did there. Okay. And then in order to mix the black that we're going to use around this area and at the top, use the existing mixture you have and just top that up with some neutral tint. So I'll show you that. You can even add, you know, a bit of, so I got this mixture, and then I'm going to top it up with a real thick mixture of neutral tint. So it has to stick to your palette. So very, very thick. And, you know, you can even put your palette on a tilt. If it's still running, like mine is here, it's not thick enough. So I had a lot of water on my neutral tint, and that's part of the issue I have there. But this part here, you can see it's no longer running, whereas this part is running. So I'm going to concentrate on using that part of it. And that's the black that we will apply at the bottom of the bird, as well as, okay. All right, we're back again, and we were mixing our black, which we did. Sometimes when it sits on the palette a while, it does get runny. So just double check that you've got a good consistency in there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start at the top here, where his, there's a tiny bit of black along there. And then goes above his eye, but doesn't quite touch his eye. It goes more up like that, and then it starts to go close to his eye at the back. Takes a little dip. And then it has a few hairs. I need a bit more paint on my brush here. There's a few hairs like that coming out. Not many, and some of them are blurry too. Something like that will probably do the trick. I'm a bit thick here, so I need to get that. He's going to have 3 things coming out. Maybe go down a little bit further here. It goes down to the bend of the neck, but the shape is not the greatest there, but I think we're okay. And then with the same paint, this is the paint that we used to mark this black spot here, which seems to be like a little hump in his wing. Okay, there's a little hump on his wing. I'm grabbing more paint, and then joining the hump is this part. And there's also some lines that go up, representing the hair that's coming across, or feathers, I keep calling it hair, across the body there. And this part's pretty easy. You just keep going around, filling it in. Okay, there's a part here that goes up like this. Keeping that should kind of blend in there, but we can do that later. And then here you can kind of mirror the shape of what you think the feathers might be like coming down there. Okay, and then there's a couple spots where it kind of goes up like that at the end. I'm leaving a few spots there to maybe put some more blue at the end of that. Okay. And just make sure this line is nice and smooth. Try to do it all in one stroke. That helps. And that's about it. Now there's a little bit of black in here, but I think we covered that. It might not be quite as dark as we would have liked, so we'll just add a tiny bit there. And that's it. So that catches us up to what we did in class. In fact, we did not do this part in class, so I will do that one more time. Take this protective sheet off. So all I want to do here is grab some black and do the same thing again. Let's get my picture in the frame. Okay, so there's a spot here. And that's about it. Now this time I can't turn my paper, so I'm just going to have to do my best here. The paint is very thick, so it's not as easy to spread. And a couple of things coming off here like that. It gets close to the eye down here, doesn't it? It's actually closer to the eye than I put it there. So I'm just going to extend it there a bit. Okay. Okay, grab some more paint, make sure my brush is ready to go to do this part. It seems to me that this one goes here and this one goes here. And I think that might do it. Got skinny in the middle there. Okay, so that is that. And then the other thing we could do is just put a few more black marks down where the body is, like so. I think that'll do it. And there's a couple coming this way, so let's just do those. I think that works. Okay. So we're caught up to where we were in class. We did do the beak in class on this other one, so we can tackle the beak next. This one I do have masking on, and this one I did not. It was quite a mess, but I just took a magic eraser and erased all the background there. So on that one we'll have to come back and darken the background in that particular one. So all in all, I think we're in good shape. We can tackle the eye now, which to me looks like it's blue and then it's purple. But we'll start, since we have black on our brush, we'll start just by doing the central part of the eye. And then we're going to have to let that dry. So that's going to dry. In the meantime, we could start on the beak. So let's do that. So beak looks like it goes from yellow to orange, maybe a bit of pink and a bit of purple in there. So we need a very clean brush. I lost the recording of the beak, so I'm just doing that again for you on a scrap piece of paper. It's pretty straightforward. You're basically blending a yellow, a pink, and a purple as you get up to this part here. So maybe I'll move this up a little bit. So I'm going to start with gamboge because I think it's a better color than the lemony yellow. One of the things with yellow is to just make sure that your brush is completely clean. Often there's some residue color in there, and you want to make sure, especially with yellow, that it is a very pure color. So I'm not wetting anything beforehand. I'm just applying the yellow. You could erase your pencil marks if you wanted to. I'm rinsing my brush, and then I'm going in with some opera pink. You could also use Queen Rose as well. And the beak is kind of gray underneath, so you could add a bit of purple to that yellow, and it will give you that bit of gray that you need underneath the beak. And then it starts getting quite pink and quite purple, so I'm rinsing my brush again. I dried it off a little bit. I got some good pink there. And then I'm going to add some Imperial Purple. As we get further up here, it gets really purple, as it's a bit too weak there. So go in with my purple a bit stronger. And this is just kind of like a graduated approach. And then we need some ultramarine. It's almost like a rainbow of colors. As we get closer to his eye, there's more ultramarine. And it's a bit too watery of a mixture. That there you can see that. I might just take some of that color back. Add a bit more pink. So I'm going both ways to kind of blend that color nicely. And then underneath here, again, it's darker. It's got more purple in it. Okay, and then there's this shape that kind of comes down in this angle. It's actually sharper than that. Okay, and then I'm going to go right into my well to get a darker version of that purple. In this case, ultramarine. And I can now go around the outside of this eye with that, although it's quite thick on my brush, so I might just take a tiny bit off. I want it to still be thick, but I want to be able to move the brush around here. So I'm going around the eye with that thick mixture, and then just shaping this part here, and shaping this part that kind of goes from the bottom of his eye out. And that's pretty much it. Rinse off my brush a bit and just make sure that these gradually flow in to the other colors. And we'll come back and we'll do the yellow in the middle of his eye once everything is dry. And then I'm just going to take a damp brush and kind of soften this edge here, because to me it looks like it softens into his skin there. And that's basically what we needed to do. And I'm just gonna, just so you can see this, oh boy, you know what it is? My neutral tint is kind of lumpy. It's gooey. So when I grab some of it, I'm just putting this in so you can get some sense of how this goes around his eye. There's a bit of a drop down, and then it goes out here. Need a tiny bit of water. And then this, I'll take this off here. This goes down. If you put your wrist on the table, then it helps your brush work be more steady. You can also put your baby finger there, hold it up with your baby finger if that works better. So that's pretty much it for the beak that we missed earlier. I'm switching back and forth a lot because some of the things I'm doing on one bird and not the other bird. So we're back to this one. I'm going to do the legs on this one, and I'm going to extend a bit of the color here, make it darker so that this white shows up a little bit. So I'm just going to take some of the blue mixture, that teal mixture that we had, or steel gray, I mean, that we had, and just add some marks in here, some darker marks to highlight this part of the bird where it comes down. Okay, and it helps We might use gouache, or we might darken this area. I might mask it, I'm not sure at this point what the best strategy will be, but I wanted to get that in. And then we have our legs to do and the tree trunk. So let's do our legs and mix up everything that's in our palette. So the blues, except for the neutral tint, we don't need the neutral tint. And mix some, and add some opera pink to that. And add some of that gamboge to that. And should make a nice light brown, maybe a bit too light at this point. Let's add some blue. Okay, so now it's too green. I can add some purple to that. That will darken it a bit, but the legs look a little red, so I'm going to continue with my opera pink in there as well. So there's also blue at the top of the legs, but let's start with this one here. It has quite a bit of highlight on the one side. It kind of goes down like that. I did a very rough background on this, trying to save the highlight, and now it's not really blending in that great, but we'll see if we can salvage it. Okay. And this leg goes down, and then it's on the top. Of that. Okay, so I got that dent in his leg, which I wanted. And then down here, same thing, but there's no highlight here. And this leg is quite, well, there is a bit of highlight right there, but this leg is quite thick. So we'll have to work around that as well. I'm just going to leave it highlighted like that for now. And this leg goes right down. And then it goes across like that. And has a spot sticking out like so. And then up here, I'm going to have it join the blue. And I'm going to have it darker blue on this side. And almost neutral tint on this side. So especially when it gets right up into the bird, it's quite dark there. Well, it's going to be quite, well, it's better to try and keep it brown on top here. Okay. And then this part has a little nodule that sticks out and is catching the light, which I hope we're able to do. We'll see. We might have to do our branches quite a bit.
Hi, I didn't realize that you couldn't see what I was painting, so I've inserted the final image of the legs here so that you can kind of follow along. Basically, it was lighter on the left-hand side on the legs and darker on the right-hand side. And then the tree branch I tried to keep in gray and blue tones so that you could identify where the legs were. Hope that helps.
This is just the first layer. We will add another layer to the branches. And then same thing here. Maybe have this point out like that. Something like that. Can add a little bit of brown on this side to it too, if you want. Can do the same with this. Add some brown down there. And we'll have to wait to do the branch behind his feet, because that is not going to, and I think here, I'm just going to clean my brush. I think here we could go even lighter with the brown, maybe even gold, I'm thinking, to make just before the highlight. a little bit of gold there. I think that helps, and we'll put a little bit of gold here. Okay, and then we have to go up into the bird here. I forgot about that. So we'll probably need a scrubber brush to get that out. This was just blue, so let that dry, and then we can fix that part of the leg. It should be blue. And then there is some darker spots around these joints. Let's put those in. Here and there. Looks like he's got a knee joint there. Something like that. Okay. So what to do down here, and should we darken the background on this one? It's very light. I don't mind it. This background is a bit darker, and we'll probably darken this background, I think. And we'll try to leave this one light like it is. So other than that, I think we're fairly good, other than what should we do down here? That is the question. We are getting some of that white showing through, but we'd have to go in with a really light blue. Let me just see whether I think what I'll try here is lavender. Lavender is an opaque color, but it's very light. And if I just apply that and try to avoid the white areas, it might give me the effect that I'm looking for. I'm going to try that first. Worst case scenario, I can always come back in with some cobalt, maybe even mixed with that. But I have to try to keep the whites and show some of this color coming down. I think at first it's quite dark at the top, and then I can use the lavender again to go up this way. It's not bad. It's starting to show his body, which I wanted to get in there. If I mix it with a bit of cobalt, it would be bluer. Not bad. I think it needs a bit more darkness right in here. I was trying to put in a darker version of that so that it looks like his body is further down here, kind of shining through. A couple spots like that where his body is. It's not bad. I think I'm okay with that. Oh, you can't quite see it, sorry. Okay, let's stick with that for now. And then these are dry, so we can do our tree. I'm going to keep the tree branch kind of bluish. It's going to be darker on this side. Fill in all these holes. And probably much darker here. Okay. And a few dark marks on the bottom here. I'm changing the shape every time because I want to make sure I show that highlight, but yeah, it doesn't really look like a highlight. Should have used masking for that, I think. I guess it's okay. Put a little bit of brown in that spot there. Yeah. See, this white would have carried all the way down. We might have to use some gouache on the highlights of that part. Okay. And then what still needs to be done, I think we almost need a whole layer over here. This is not dark enough. On this one, I went quite a bit darker in this section, and I think it looks better. So I'm going to do that, and I think the actual feathers start more up here. They're not right here, so it could use a coat there. So let's just put some water on it. But we want a nice smooth coat here. It won't get rid of these lines. They'll still remain, and then we can try that water effect underneath here, which I believe our combination that worked the best was the ultramarine with a little bit of neutral tint, and we'll put a bit of cobalt in there as well. So we want this part to be a bit darker as we go around here. It's almost like the other benefit of this is it kind of highlights that white spot. Okay, and then I think that will help. Okay, I'm not getting rid of all of those lines there, but I'm just getting it. It does look like it's quite a bit darker in this area. And then down here, this is the spot where we can strike up. And get that a bit darker. And add some purple to this mix. Neutral tint. Maybe a bit too purple there. So it's still wet, so these lines are going to fuzz out. But what I'm trying to do is get it quite dark in this part here. Actually, I can extend that down a bit. Okay. And I'm not using that here. I'm just kind of washing this up. Because to me it looks a little lighter around here. Oops, I want to make sure these are soft. Okay, so I've got a bit more color in this area. And now I can wait for it to dry a little bit and then go in with a dark put those, I think I need to fix this. Okay. And then this is the area where we were going to try to just drop water in and see if we can make a texture there. And then here. Okay, maybe a bit more blue in there. I'll have to wait till it dries again because it's too wet to make these lines the way that I want them to be. The other thing you can do, while we don't do that yet, is we can use an opaque paint to go over top of where it's dry here. Now the next question is, what if I want my background darker? How can I do that when I've already done the whole bird and I want to try and highlight where I've got some of this masking, etc. So the challenge is, when we do that, we're going to have to go a little bit further in and cover what's already there. So one of the decisions to make is, how important is it to be dark and where? So we can decide, okay, it should be darker here and it should be darker here. Then I run the risk of not having a smooth line here. But my opinion is, if you're going to try to do this, just do a section and a section. I missed the highlights on his legs, so I could try to do it a tiny bit darker behind there. But let's give it a shot and see how we make out. We're going to have to mix the background colors that we want to use. And actually on this one, we still have to finish the eye, so maybe we'll do that first. And then mix the background colors and recover the... Okay, so let's talk about cleaning up your painting, cleaning up the edges and so on. So this one is completely dry. I have, I like the background, so I've decided I'm going to stick with it. And I'm just going to start by cleaning up some of these edges. And what I need is, I need a clean brush, a clean piece of paper towel, some scrubber brushes of different sizes. So let's get all that ready and then we can start. All right, so fixing your edges. So my recommendation is you start with the softest scrubbers that you have, even a flat brush, and use them first. And then if it requires you to go a little harder, then you can do that as well. So generally the method is, your paper is completely dry and you take a section and you just damply wet it. And then you take a small scrubber that you know is clean. So in my case here, I have a pencil line as well. So this is just a number 3 Rosemary & Co. Natural Sable brush. So it is very light. And you have to keep wetting your brush. Okay, so that's that. Then my next brush is a bit harder. It's a, what's its name? It's a Billy Showell scrubber brush. What you're doing is you're moving the paint that's already there around. And you go into your water and then you wipe it off on the towel. And then it just softens up that whole edge. I'm doing it again. So just very lightly scrubbing it. And now I'm going to the next level, which is this one. It's a bigger brush, but it's still fairly soft. So I wet it, I wiped it off. Check on a piece of paper if it's the first time you're using it, just to make sure it's clean. And it just smooths out that line so it doesn't look as harsh. The other thing you can try is you can try going in from an edge and out from an edge. So if I'm trying to retain more white, I can go like this and push that edge out. I don't want to go too close to this black. Just push out. Okay, clean off the brush. Go again. Clean off the brush. Water, cloth. Okay, so it's really smoothing out that whole edge there, and at the same time it's getting rid of some of the pencil marks, which is this white one, but I'm just going really, really lightly. I'm not pressing hard at all. And that's just taking out that line. And then I'm going back and just dab out any extra liquid that might be there. That also helps. Okay. So the other areas that you might need to fix is ones like this, where the paint from the neck has actually run in. Now that was a bit too aggressive of a brush. As you can see, it picked up all the paint that was there. So I'm going to switch to a softer one. And then just kind of feather around in a swirling motion to get that all brought in. Okay. I'm going to do that a little bit down here. I don't mind that there's a little bit of a glow on that side, so I'm not worrying too much about that. Sure my head is not in here. It's not. Wet it down both sides. That one is fairly soft, so maybe I'll just continue with that. Maybe I'll do this one instead. And it's very time consuming, but it's worth it. Once you're done, it's going to look way better than it did before. Smooth out all the edges. Okay, I need to wet it again. Okay. Yeah, and it's okay if some of these edges are, totally blur out. That's not a bad thing either. In each painting you should have some lost edges. Lost edge just by dragging it over. Like so. And do the same thing here. This I don't want to be a lost edge because this is where all the highlight is. Okay. Now this whole part here is going to be a bit tricky as well because there's a very hard line down there. And we don't want too much of that green in the bird where it's white. Okay, clean the brush because otherwise we'll be spreading that green around. Now, as we mentioned before, there should be some lost edges, so I'm just going to do that here. Soften this out. It's not an important part of the bird. And the other thing you can do is, we had kind of a lost edge there. Let's do a lost edge right here. Let's just scrape this out. Take a paper towel. The other thing it does is it attaches him to his background, or her, depending on what she is. This part here, I think I'm going to do the same. Okay, and then this part here as well. Even though in the picture this shows really bright, It happens to be the back of the bird. It's not as important to make sure that that is highlighted, because with lost edges, your eye doesn't stay on them. Okay. All right, so it's not bad. A few marks there. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to have these legs highlighted. So I'm not going to pre-wet it this time. I'm just going to take a pretty aggressive brush. Maybe too aggressive there. Okay. Maybe it's going to have to be the Billy Shower one. Cleaning it, wiping it off. Now what would make that look even more highlighted is if we had a darker background on his legs. But we really want to draw the eye up here onto the bird's neck, not necessarily down here. And then the same thing, you can be a little bit more aggressive, hopefully, on the tree trunk. Green is a hard color to get off, so sometimes that just will never come out enough. This part here. I'm just going to do this part here. I'm not going to do the rest of the leg. To the tree trunk. I don't want the color, the same color as the legs though, so it's going to have to be quite a bluey brown. In the end, I ended up creating 3 different paintings for the heron. This one I decided to do the dark background. I did do a tiny bit of masking here and a tiny bit of masking on the legs that I think worked out okay. And that is the draft version, I guess, that I did. And then the next one is this one, which we did most of this in class, but I added a darker background onto it. And this is what we ended up with for that one. I like this one. I like the color combinations. The eye still probably needs some work. I may go back to this in a day or two just to look at a few things here. I had masking. So let's just see what the effect was of the masking for the feathers. It was pretty light. I probably had a bit of masking up there. I think that was pretty much it as far as masking is concerned. And that turned out okay, but I would say that that probably needs a little bit of gouache on that one. I often use this Phil Martin's Bleed Proof White. Not many artists do. A lot of them use titanium white, Chinese white, but I tend to have used this from the beginning. I should try some other whites because this is a bit chalky, but if I just add a little bit of white, what ends up happening is it dries a lot duller than what you see when you originally put it down. So even though you might think, okay, I've got that covered, you kind of have to go back to it again and do a second layer to get it to come out as white as you would like it to come out. So I'm just going to add a few lines here. It's not as bright as I would have liked. One thing is to just do this on the parts that are very dark as well. That also helps. Got a bit of white here, so I may as well just extend that out a little bit. The other thing you can do, I like the way that this one is done. I like the effect along the back. There's only a couple of spots that I think I could drag this down a bit further. So we'll just try that. I don't want too many of these because I find it looks better the less you do. And these end up being kind of dull, as I said earlier. You almost have to go once or twice over the same spot for them to show up. Looks pretty white right now, but it may not be that white in the end. Okay, so that's that one. The next one was this one. And again, I think it could benefit with some of the gouache on here. So I'm just going to put some of that down on this one as well. I liked on the other one that there was more white along the back. So right here, I liked that part of it. And you could also do that here is to make this part look a little bit like it feathers out. Might be a bit too dominant at this point, so just soften it a little bit, like so. All in all, I like this part here. I think it looks pretty good. So I don't really think I need too much white on this, but it's in my hand and that's what's happening. I like a few going out this way. Kind of curving out a little bit. Okay, what I do like about this one is I like the whole background. I think that turned out kind of nice. There's a little spot up there. The other place you can use your white is just to, there's a ball in his foot. So that part down here didn't really show up too much. Like it's almost like it's a joint, but you'll see that the white looks a little rough at this point. Sometimes you have to go back in. I think that's good enough. So that's that one. And they all have their different advantages. They're all just slightly different. So there you go.